older people is not readily available in Guyana. And do you have any plans progress to have that sorted out and improved upon?
Yeah. That's a very good point. And I think before you had asked about legislation, and I didn't mention that. Well, for the tourism sector, there is legislation that ensures that the standards in terms of the operation of hotels, guest houses, restaurants, the whole safety standards also are all embodied in legislation that we have already. Similarly, we have very dynamic legislation for persons with disabilities. The problem we have is that we now have to start looking at enforcing that legislation. And when it comes to disabilities, you're absolutely right. As you know, traditionally our old wooden buildings have always been constructed with steps. And in those days, not enough recognition was given to disabilities, people with disabilities. The houses were built on stilts with the steps because of the flooding, and Guyana is 6 feet below sea level. So that's why it was done. But now we have to get to the point where we not only have the good legislation, but we need to start saying to more new entities and even existing ones, you must have a wheelchair ramp. And you would be surprised to know that process has started. But it was only about 2 years ago that the Parliament, the House that represents the views and the developments of the people of this country, it was only about 2 or 3 years ago that the Parliament changed the configuration of the front of the entranceway and provided wheelchair access.
I noticed that last week.
Yes, so we have a lot more to do in those areas.
Quite a lot more. And
Yes.
I know people in the diaspora, they have money and they can afford it, and they'll have the desire also to send their their parents who probably want to come back home. Most likely the older folks want to come back home to
Yeah.
spend some time, and the kids, their kids living in America or in Canada or wherever, they want to let our mother and father go for a vacation, but then they can't walk properly. You know, they have this arthritis or something, and how can we send them? They don't have anywhere to go. I have personal experience with that. My mom, she had her knee replacement. We want to take her to Kaitor Falls. We have the money, we have the resources, but she can't go. How would she go? Because from the plane, to get on the plane is one thing, to get her off the plane is another, and to get her from the plane, where the plane would land, there, to go in to see the falls, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, you're right. We need to do more on that. And I'm glad that you've raised it, and that's the beauty of conversations like this, because we need to go at a fastest pace. There is a Commission on Disabilities, and there is also a parliamentary committee. And so we got to make sure that a lot of these committees start doing more of their work.
I can share an idea with you.
Please do that.
We can have a specially designed bus, or 15-seater.
Yeah, that has
that can lift there.
Very good idea.
And just keep it there at Kaitor Falls. That can drive these people from the plane to the falls.
Yeah.
Where they can sit down and watch through the window, maybe.
Yeah.
I feel so sorry for them. They want to see it, and we can't provide that.
As you're talking about,
and it's possible.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how
we can have
about the actual bus.
No, I'm just saying the concept.
The concept for sure.
Yes.
And then I've been to Kaitor quite a few times, and with just some minimal work, it would make it easier for a wheelchair to go through.
Exactly.
But then we would have to have some kind of ramp at the airports or something that could get somebody comfortably into a plane, And maybe, when you talk about investment, this is where the Partnership for Developing Guyana has to be a partnership with the private sector and the government. Because if you think about it, maybe what we should do is we throw it out to a private sector company to maybe consider that for some planes that can be outfitted, if we have an emergency, there are planes that they take it out.
Countries.
Right, we could outfit a plane so that if there were someone with a disability, that that this airline could provide.
I just thought of something.
You know?
The same buckets that GC uses, the bucket that they
Yes.
use. Those, if you alter the plane with a door and you have one of those things that goes
Something
in the bucket,
like that,
you just put them in the rack,
yeah,
bring them right down.
Yeah.
Those bucket things. that
But
you-
it's like how in the US some of the vehicles for the disabled,
Yes, they have that.
they have like a kind of ramp
Lift.
that
Yeah, of
lifts it
course.
up.
Yes,
So,
it's happening all the time.
we
right?
have these are the
It is not
things.
rocket science.
No, it
Minister.
is.
Yeah.
I know
Let
you're
us get it
absolutely
done.
right. Yeah, but you know those are the kinds of things, and this is where I say the private sector can help too, because if somebody wants to do that as a business, they could make money.
Tell your viewers.
Yeah, we
invite
just
them.
talked about it.
Invite them.
Investors, we're looking for investors too, and we
To
just
bring
threw
in
out some ideas.
The well designed for
Technology.
Yes,
designed
yes, yes.
equipment, the machinery,
Yes.
and equipment to take care of
Yeah.
elderly.
And that, you know, the investment side, since we're talking about that, is
Okay, go
important.
ahead. Okay, go
It's
ahead.
important to us in Guyana today, because this is where I think the diaspora could play a role. We have lost a lot of our skills and experience because people in Guyana have left. Guyanese have left and gone to other countries.
But
Um,
many want to come back and you're not
and-
accepting them, I understand.
No, why would you say we're not accepting them?
joking.
Oh, you're joking. No, because we want them to come back. And I say that they don't even have to come back and move back and live in Guyana. Today's technology, as you would know, because I know you're traveling with your laptop, I'm sure,
Yes.
and then you turn it on in the morning, and I do the same thing when I travel, and we're checking what's happening at our office, we're sending our emails. So it's easy today for you to invest in a business or a product in Guyana and to reap the returns. And so Guyana is open for investment. We just about hired a new head of the Go Invest.
It's the Owen Revere.
Right, and I don't know the gentleman, but he comes, you know, with recommendations. And I Go Invest is as a whole area that we want to make it easier for people. We actually at the Ministry of Tourism have several areas too, where we're encouraging people to come and invest in the tourism sector. Whether it is you have a great idea, you want to create a safari somewhere in the Rupununi, we don't have a safari, but we have all these beautiful animals. So whether you want to do some other kind of service, another resort or ranch, whatever it is, you know, there's endless opportunities. And we have a very attractive investment policy, not only in agriculture. We talk about recognizing, they say that the next shortage in the world is going to be food. And in the next 20 years, water. And so those are two areas we are, thank God, have a tremendous gift for. And therefore we say to Guyanese in the diaspora, if you're looking to come home, then you could come and invest, even if it's not on a full-time basis. And then I also say to Guyanese that, you know, we need your skills, we need the experience you've had living outside. I urge Guyanese to help their old high school, their old primary school, the church that they went to, you know, the community they came from. Those are all ways that together we can really build this country.
Yeah, Minister, you also have a lot of other, as you said earlier, portfolios here. You're responsible for governance, the fiber optic cables,
Yes.
technology, national frequency management unit. You're also in charge of the Guyana Postal Services Corporation, the national data management. You're a goddess. And as the Hindus will say, Goddess Lakshmi. You do everything.
Well, let me explain that.
Yeah,
a
can
bit.
you tell our viewers a little bit about each aspect of your responsibilities here, please?
Sure.
Briefly. Because,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
we
I know
wanna
we
have
don't
an
have
idea.
much. Yeah, well, let me tell you. In January 1st of 2016, the Honorable President David Granger made a slight change. The way he explained it is that he said he looked at and realized that there was a gap. That we needed to be focusing more on information technology, on telecommunications, because we recognize that that is a foundation of any society, especially today. So one of the things we have is that in Guyana there's no new telecoms legislation. And even in terms of the way the country was structured years ago, and here I'm talking about from independence, We have an old Wireless and Telegraphic Act, and that act is from 1956.
It's outdated, absolutely.
It's very obsolete. But under that, imagine that in those days, the key infrastructure information technology would have been the postal services. So that's how come I have a hodgepodge of things
based on the old legislation.
because of the old legislation.
Okay.
So it does include the postal services, all the post offices.
Now it's
And then
clear to me.
yes. And then now it includes telecoms. I'm happy to say that there's a telecoms legislation that had been rewritten, and it was in a select committee in one parliament before. Actually 2 parliaments before, since 2012. And so that had a lot of consultation. And that law, the suggestions of that revised Telecommunications Act, actually frees up and liberalizes our environment. So as you would know, for many years, GT&T and its parent US company had the monopoly on telecommunication services. Then what happened when Digicel came in is that we gave up only the cellular part, because that wasn't part of the original legislation from contract from many years ago. So we have Digicel there, but now we're recognizing, and I'm happy that GT&T themselves have said, yeah, you know, we don't mind giving up this monopoly, because we realize that we need to have a competitive environment. When there's a competitive environment and more players coming into the landscape, then the consumers win. The price comes down. And so what we're looking at is ensuring that across the length and breadth of Guyana, we have better broadband and internet access.
Better than what?
Well, better than we have now.
Oh.
So as you know, our system is still on a 2G. Other parts of the world are on 3 and 4G. So those, and that of course all determines the access to the technology you can use, the speed.
How soon do you think we're going to have 4G?
Well, let me tell you.
Are we going to skip 3G?
Well, I hope we will. I hope we will. And that's where the frequencies and national frequency management comes in. Because that is part of my umbrella also. But as you can see, frequencies and the allocation of frequencies for radio sets, for fishermen, for travel, for security, for radio stations, for television stations are all an important part. So the frequency, the national frequency management fits in there. Now, the government's commitment with this new Ministry of Public Telecommunications, of which tourism is now part of that umbrella organization, is that we want to be able to speed up our development and process. When it comes to information technologies, we want to computerize more of the government offices. We want to have hotspots in more parts of the cities of our cities where people can actually be able to, on their phone, you know, if for example you're in Georgetown and you want to find out quickly what's a good restaurant, instead of trying to go to the tourism office and get a booklet, you could punch into your phone. Siri could maybe answer you and say, the closest restaurant is wherever. All those are technologies.
Yeah, the GPS has to.
The GPS and all those things.
We have the GPS here.
So that is why the whole development and our e-government unit is very, very instrumental to that.
I'm so anxious to see all of that working. How soon, Minister, you think this thing can get going so that we can have people coming here?
The pressure is on. No, the pressure is on. And what I want to say is that, you know, up
1
until
year,
last week,
6 months.
I have promised that the legislation will come to the Parliament and will be passed before the end of 2016. I'm hoping in the next 6 months. And then once we have that, then we have to look at reallocating some free. Well, I'm going as fast as possible. But remember, it does require some negotiations with GT&T. It also requires...
The parent company also.
Exactly. And then it also, in the information technology side, us opening it up, inviting other companies, put the specs there, so people can come into the market There are laws, infrastructure we need to put in place. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I'm happy to say that once now we've gotten over the budget, and we spent a good 2 weeks non-stop every night until 11 o'clock in the evening, going through the budget debates and passing the budgets, explaining what we were going to do with the money. It's a very transparent process. So now we can start focusing on what we need to do on the telecom side.
We still have 2 points to touch on here: the Guyana Postal
Well,
Service Corporation and the National Data Management.
Right, the
Unit.
data management unit is tied in with the e-government. So the e-government unit is going to, that's the mechanism by which you're going to computerize most of the government agencies and the way they serve the public. So it means that when you come to Guyana, they tell you go to the government office, you go into NIS. You gotta go to NIS and pick up the form. Now I'm happy to say that NIS has made a lot of progress and those forms are all online. But we want to get to the stage where you could fill in the form online, send it back to NIS, and then NIS will be telling you, okay, come in and get your card and whatever else it is. As opposed to 10 years ago when you'd have to go in and get the form, fill in the form, go back, drop off the form, go back when your card is ready or whatever the specific transaction. The Data Management Authority is actually connected to the whole e-commerce within the government network. So when it comes to the agency that provides government offices with training for their staff on how to use computers, in addition to the private sector that does that training, the Data Management Authority helps in that area. They advise the government on how to store data and information on a computerized format. So all those agencies, although they sound like many, they are luckily interconnected. The post office services, I have to admit, in the 2 months that I've had, and it's just about 2 months, I've had on the job, I haven't spent as much time with the postal services. But one of the things that we are doing in the initial meetings that we recognize is that, like in other parts of the world, we have to redesign the role our post offices play. Post offices used to make their money sending out letters and bringing letters in, selling stamps. But now, as you know, people very rarely email. People very rarely write a letter. Everybody's on email and everything. And texting, exactly. So the income and revenues that the post offices used to get have declined tremendously. But I still think there's a role for the post offices.
There's a great role.
Exactly, especially in our hinterland areas.
No, now you have even a greater role.
Yeah.
Because not only the hinterland, but I think now with the e-commerce taking place, people can shop online and have their packages dropped off, and now we can redefine probably the functions of
the post office. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the reasons why we recognize it's important to push the development of our ICT sector is because we discover, the statistics show that when in a country there's better access to the internet, then there's automatically improvement in your GDP and your development levels.
Absolutely.
Because the whole commerce aspect, there's a direct correlation. So when we talk about the post office, imagine that if I am in Guyana and I make fabulous hammocks, like the Rupanuni weavers used to make years ago, and those are things we want to improve on. Somebody in Anai or in Rockview or any part, Napi village, a lady in Napi who has the indigenous art of making indigenous hammocks, could make her 2, 3, 4 hammocks a year, or how much ever it is. Have a little website, exactly, and then mail it to whoever it is in Canada, Toronto, whatever. The technology is there now where, even if she doesn't have the mechanism and a credit card, but the role of the post office could be such that...
Facilitate that.
Exactly, to facilitate that development. So I think there's still a good role for post offices, especially in our landscape where we recognize that there are loads of communities that don't have direct contact.
Minister, we are talking about the liberalization of telecommunications here. You're having some kind of bill being tabled in Parliament for that?
Yes, yes. And
How soon do you think that will pass through Parliament?
I am hoping we actually have legislation that was drafted, and it was in 2012.
What are some
And
of the
there's
highlights of that, and how soon
Well-
it can be implemented?
Well, the highlights of it mainly is that it will open up the market, so other companies could come into the market. It also defines the framework and the organs or the structure of a new telecommunications environment. It also, of course, as you would know, we have a Public Utilities Commission that monitors the rates that our utilities charge. So it also looks at that relationship. I think that I would want to say that within 6 months max,
Okay, very good.
and long before that. There was extensive consultation in 2012, and then the legislation was just left for a while, and not much happened. So I think that really my role is going to just be pick it up, and maybe we're going to say to the private sector, to the public, and generally, this is a copy of it. It's online at this website. If you have comments that you'd like to give, we'll open up a period of consultation still. But I'm so excited that a lot of work was done that I think that we're like 80% there. So it's not starting from scratch. We're picking up and then we're saying, look, let's get it into the Parliament, let's change it. And you know, any legislation I think is a work in progress. And so if at least we get that and we start the process, the ball rolling, so to speak, then in time, if there are other aspects, we could bring it with revised legislation.
Let me take this opportunity to ask our good colleague here, Jonathan Sobrine, to pose his question.
Well, before I do this, a little anecdote I want to give you that matches your e-commerce versus tourism. In the 80s, when Guyana in terms of tourism was not very well known in many places, I sent a letter from New York to my mom. 4.5 years later, she received a letter.
Oh my goodness.
The letter, because Guyana wasn't known, then it went to Ghana
Yeah.
in Africa, then it went to Argentina and so many other places. But she did get the letter, so there's a confidence in the postal service. I have full faith in the postal service. 4.5 years later, the letter was delivered 23 degrees south of my mother.
Oh my goodness.
So we did receive that. So
Yeah,
that is an anecdote.
Yeah.
Now, on the question of tourism, and just humor me for this, the mass exodus of people leaving Guyana happened perhaps in the 80s, and then it accelerated in the 90s.